Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. Welcome to the Big Virtual Iftar. We have a jam-packed event for you today with a group of really diverse speakers on many interesting topics. We have a representative of our armed forces, we have a representative of the Surrey Police Force, as well as imams and scholars to enlighten you and educate you. We're going to be watching different videos on the Share Iftar initiative. We're going to be getting feedback from the National Fasting Challenge, and we're also going to have a Q&A at the end of it. So if you're fasting, then it's a great way to spend the time until you break your fast, where you're going to be learning and hopefully, being educated on a few different things and understanding how community cohesion is how we're serving mankind. And that is, in fact, the topic of today, serving mankind, the key to community cohesion. And even if you're not fasting, you'll still be learning and hopefully having some entertainment as well. And we hope that you're going to enjoy this event. The first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be going over to a recitation of the Holy Quran. And this is how we start traditionally all of the events in the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. So right now we're going to go over to that recitation.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون أياما معدودات فمن كان منكم مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر وعلى الذين يطيقونه فدية طعام مسكين فمن تطوع خيرا فهو خير له وأن تصوموا خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. Translation. In the name of Allah, the Gracious, the Merciful. O ye who believe, fasting is prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, so that you may guard against evil. The prescribed fasting is for a fixed number of days. But whoso among you is sick or is on a journey shall fast the same number of other days. And for those who are able to fast with great difficulty is an expiation, the feeding of a poor man. And whoso does good of his own accord, it is better for him. And fasting is good for you if you only knew. Chapter Al-Baqarah, verse 184, 185.
Thank you very much for sharing that video of this beautiful recitation of the Holy Quran. This event, the Big Virtual Iftar, is hosted by the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. Chancellor, you may well have been invited by a member of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. We're now going to share a video that tells you a little bit more about us.
The Ahmadiyya Muslim community is a dynamic, fast-growing international revival movement within Islam. Founded in 1889, the community spans more than 195 countries, with membership exceeding tens of millions. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community is the only Muslim community to believe that the long-awaited promised Messiah has arrived, in the person of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian, India. The promised Messiah claimed to be the metaphorical second coming of Jesus of Nazareth, and the divine guide whose advent was foretold by the holy prophet of Islam, Muhammad, peace be upon him. The community believes that Allah has sent the promised Messiah to end religious wars, condemn bloodshed, and to reinstitute morality, justice, and peace for mankind. The advent of the promised Messiah has brought an unprecedented era of Islamic revival. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community is the leading Islamic organization that categorically rejects any form of terrorism. Over a century ago, the promised Messiah emphatically declared that the doctrine of violent jihad goes against the teachings of the Holy Quran and the practice of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. The promised Messiah's advent has ushered in a new era of dialogue, tolerance, and prayer. The promised Messiah penned over 80 books and thousands of articles, delivering countless lectures, engaging in public debate, and prayer duels in an intellectual, spiritual campaign to defend the true honor of Islam. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community is the foremost Islamic organization with a central spiritual leader. Over a century ago, the promised Messiah reminded his followers of Allah's promise to safeguard the message of Islam through Khilafat, the spiritual institution of successorship to prophethood. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community believes that only the spiritual successorship can uphold the true values of Islam and unite humanity. 5 spiritual leaders have succeeded the promised Messiah since his passing in 1908. The 5th head of the community, His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, resides in the United Kingdom. Under the leadership of its spiritual successors, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community has built over 15,000 mosques, over 500 schools, and more than 30 hospitals. It has translated the Holy Quran to over 60 languages. The community propagates the peaceful true teachings of Islam through a 24-hour broadcast channel, MTA, through the community's website, alislam.org, and print, Islam International Publications. The community has been at the forefront of disaster response worldwide through an independent charity, Humanity First.
Thank you very much for sharing that video. I hope you all got something out of it. We're going to now look at a poll, and the purpose of this poll is primarily just to sort of get your views on a series of issues. So we're going to be holding 3 polls. And the first question is, in your view, which of the following is an integral part of Islam? 1, loyalty to the country of residence. 2, helping the needy unconditionally. 3, caring for one's neighbors. Or 4, all of the above. And to answer this, we'd ask you just to go to slido.com, #BVI. Or if you open your camera app on your smartphone and you show that QR code, when you put it into there, it should take you automatically to the link. So if you go to slido.com or BVI, we'd like you to answer that. And the results are coming in thick and fast. And in about a minute or so, we're going to review what the answer is and see what people think. And then we're going to have a brief few comments on some of the answers. So all of the above is clearly in the lead there. Helping the needy unconditionally is second. Loyalty to the country of residence and caring for one's neighbors as exclusive options haven't received any yet. Seems to be pretty sure at the moment. People are saying that it's all of the above. So they're saying that all 3 are integral parts of Islam. And as time goes on and I speak more, it is that lead is only growing for all of the above. And let's just go through these as we, maybe 30 more seconds of getting that poll, and talk a bit about these. Let's talk about loyalty to the country of residence first. A lot of people may have the wrong impression that Islam promotes, not being loyal to your country, and this idea that you should just be loyal to your faith alone. But actually, in reality, Islam says that loyalty to your nation and to your people, to your country, is part of your Islam. And it's actually, in some ways, very much linked to the idea of caring for your neighbors, because if you truly care for your neighbors, then the citizens of your country are your most immediate neighbors in many respects, especially on the worldwide stage. And both of those are, in fact, parts of Islam. And helping the needy unconditionally is, again, something which is a true part of Islam. It's a part of every religion, and Islam puts a great deal of emphasis on this. The zakat, which is the wealth tax, is one of the key ways in which Muslims are encouraged to help the poor. And that's a tax that goes straight to the poor and the needy. And there are many other ways that we're exhorted to help the needy unconditionally. But as you may have gathered from from what I've been saying, all of the above are integral parts of Islam. Islam would be, it'd be a deficient view of Islam to think that any of these are left out. Islam promotes loyalty to your country. It promotes caring for your neighbors, and it promotes helping the needy unconditionally. And essentially, Islam is about forging a relationship with your creator and forging a relationship with his creation. Because if you all belong to the same God, then you are all brothers and sisters in humanity. And thus, we all have a bond with each other through our mutual bond with God. So thank you very much for taking part in that vote. I think we'll close that poll now. And we will be moving on. And we're going to be moving on to our first talk. I'm very excited for this. It's with Dr. Anas Rana. Dr. Anas Rana is the Charity and Welfare's Director in the Ahmadiyya Muslim Youth Association UK. He's also a very established scientist, done a lot of fantastic work in the scientific world, but in this capacity is talking about his role is, as I said, the Director of Charities and Welfare, and has done a lot of great work with with British Muslim youth from the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. He's going to be telling us about Passover, Easter, and Ramadan. So, Dr. Rana, I'll let you go for it now.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you. Jazakallah for the introduction. Thank you. So I thought the topic that I've been asked to talk about, I will put it into the broader context of the theme of today, community cohesion. So the way I understand it, community cohesion, there are three main aspects to it, especially when you look at it from a perspective of faith. First is mutual respect. Second, you've got mutual understanding, where you approach each other, and this is an important part of it, events like this. And also, really importantly, community support. And I will link those together, hopefully, over the next few minutes that I have to talk about this topic. So let's start with the basics. Mutual respect, belief in prophets, because the prophets are the ones who founded all the faith, the way we see it, as Muslims, as it says in the Holy Quran, in chapter 16. And we did raise among every people a messenger preaching, worship Allah and shun the evil one. And in that vein, we really believe that every religion that exists was founded by a prophet under divine guidance. And this includes, obviously, Prophet Moses, Prophet Jesus, and all the other religious founders that you can think of. And we really think that this way of thinking about other religions breeds respect for each other. You have theological differences, but on the ground level, you are all coming from the same divine being. And I think it's really important. Today, we've come together to talk about at this event, Big Virtual Iftar. And this is part of the different religious practices that each religion has. And I thought it would be interesting to highlight as well that fasting is a really common practice, especially among the Abrahamic religions, where we have obviously Ramadan in Islam, which we're talking about today, and we in Judaism we have Passover, and in Christianity we have Lent or Easter. And what combines all of these? What is really the core of these different practices? I think the first one, and this is a very important one, is sacrifice. You abstain from something that you take part in throughout the rest of the year. That sacrifice uh, allows you to understand people who are going through a more difficult time than you, especially all of us living in the West or living in a Western society, which is very prosperous. So we are making a sacrifice and we can experience what other people experience on a day-to-day basis. The other aspect of it, in various guises, is remembrance of history, remembrance of the struggles that your forefathers went through, rather. And finally, and I think this is, in terms of religion, the most important aspect, which is it is a form of worship. And there are many different aspects of worship. And I would like to quote the fifth Caliph, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih, the fifth, Ayyadallah Tabr Nasir Aziz, what he said on worship. I and every true Muslim have been clearly commanded that merely physical prostrating or bowing or crossing our arms or repeating certain prescribed prayers do not fulfill the true objective of worship. Rather, the purpose of worship can only be fulfilled when a person comes to follow and act upon all of God's commands. And God's commands entail fulfilling the right of both God and also of his creation. In terms of God's creation, Islam does not teach us to fulfill only the rights of humans, but rather it teaches that every form of creation, including animals and birds, must be treated with love, mercy, and compassion. The truth is that Allah has directly intertwined and interwoven the rights due to him with the rights due to mankind. So this is the Islamic understanding of worship. And this is what ties the overarching theme together with the title that I have for my talk today. And I really believe this is the community aspect that we as Ahmadi Muslims practice. Just to give you a few very brief high-level examples, that we spend time throughout the year supporting the needy. We support food banks, we support children in need, we support the disabled through various charity events, through various food drives for the homeless as well. We try to do blood donations, and we also believe that it's really important to get involved in environmental activities. And we've been for the past many years been involved in tree planting events, street cleaning events, etc. And these are all of these events, I think, are really, really crucial, and they really build community cohesion. Without them, everyone sort of does not feel part of the same community. And this is what we've learned throughout the past year, especially. And this is the final bullet point that I have there, that we also do disaster relief, obviously. And throughout the past year, this has been the central part of what my department has been doing in the Ahmadiyya Muslim Youth Association, that we have been supporting those in need, those who can't provide for themselves throughout this pandemic. And I think that is what will build community cohesion. That's what brings people from varying different backgrounds together. And if we all crossing all the boundaries of faith and beliefs, work together to support each other in these activities, I think that's how we will build a more prosperous and a more peaceful society together. And I think that is the key part here. And that is, in my understanding of religion and the view of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Association, this is one of the key parts of fasting. That's one of the key parts of Ramadan, that it reminds you, it's a remembrance of all of these aspects. It's a remembrance what worship really means in Islam. And this is what I would urge you to think about during these well, the last part of Ramadan is left, during the last parts of this. And I will leave you with a final statement that I think really encapsulates what is the central theme of community support, of helping others, because it is sometimes easy to dismiss it and do it as an afterthought. But this is a quote from, again, our current caliph, Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, Ayyadallah Ta'ala bin Aziz, and this is what he said: a righteous deed is a ladder to raise towards Islam and God. The reality of a good deed needs to be borne in mind. The promised Messiah, peace be upon him, who is the founder of our faith, gave the example of a self-indulgent person who chooses to donate leftover bread to a hungry person, despite having freshly prepared meal to hand. And they feed for love of him the poor, the orphan, and the prisoner. He did not feed the poor from what was tuam, which is an Arabic word which means desirable food for him, but from leftovers. This is not a true act of virtue. To attain a true act of virtue demands a lot of self-reflection and endeavor. True virtue cannot be acquired without having absolute faith in God Almighty. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rana, for that excellent talk and explaining to us the purpose and the way that Muslims are taught to serve others, and how we are reminded of that in Ramadan. We're going to be now, in a moment, watching a video which will be demonstrating or showing how we do that in our community. And it's just going to be a video showing a one-off event. And this event happened, I believe, in the Wednesday just gone. And it's going to be showing one way in which that we are trying to practice what we preach and serve the communities around us. So let's go to that video.
Alongside the National Fasting Challenge and the Big Virtual Iftar, the Ahmadiyya Muslim Youth Association has started a Share Iftar initiative, whereby our members prepare the evening meals, then they drop off the food at the neighbours' doorsteps, and the neighbours can enjoy that meal and watch the Big Virtual Iftar. On the 28th of April, 72 non-Muslims from the Surrey Police Force took part in the fast, in which the Ahmadiyya Muslim Youth Association then prepared the meals and dropped it off at the 4 headquarters of the Surrey Police Force. Here's some of the feedback of the participants of the fast. Here is some feedback from James Ansell, Detective Inspector of the Surrey Police Force. A date and some water never tasted so good. Breaking the fast at our virtual iftar with the amazing, the young Imam. What a thought-provoking day. So that's it. Done, although I feel guilty as I've only experienced one day where others do it for many. Full respect. The body and mind are amazing structures which I've learnt more about today. Now we can listen to Angela Packerbush from the Surrey Police Force.
I've reflected throughout the day on what is difficult, what I'm learning from this. Withholding the food is absolutely fine. Not being able to even have water is the most difficult. And it has made me realise how lucky I am to be able to just go and get a drink when I want to, and realise that there are people that are a lot less fortunate. I'm also reflecting on how difficult it is for my colleagues when they're fasting, and the office conversation is around food and drink, who's having what for supper.
Hi, my name's Shane. I work in the contact centre at Surrey Police. I've been taking part in the fasting collective today, and I've been fasting since 4:12 this morning. It's coming up 5:20 now. Very hungry. I have been doing this to show my solidarity with my colleague Sharif, who does this every year as part of Ramadan.
Rob Harris from Surrey Police, the Fasting Collective. Started off this morning, made very welcome by the young imam, and immediately I thought, well, we've got a bit of a sense of community doing this, so that's one thing to share is the support of your friends, family and peers doing it. So going through the day, that was a great help. I did it with my wife Emmy, who's a police sergeant with Surrey Police as well, and then throughout the day, actually, I just got on with it and was able to divert my attentions away from hunger and thirst.
Hello, I'm Nev Kemp, Deputy Chief Constable for Surrey Police, and I've taken part today in fasting for Ramadan. First time I've done it. Started with getting up at 3:30 this morning, a Zoom call at 4, and 12 minutes past 4, that was it. No food or drink all day long. So it's been a long day and I'm feeling quite cold and a bit tired now, but it's given me food for thought. I know one of the reasons for doing it is to think of those who are less fortunate than us, and I'm lucky that at 21 minutes past 8 this evening I'll be able to eat something and drink something, and I'm looking forward to that. I want to say thanks to the Ahmadiyya Muslim community for their contribution and support to this event, and I know they're supplying a lot of colleagues with food parcels to break the fast at the end of today. But I have to say I'm pretty full of admiration for Muslim colleagues and Muslim community who do this on a regular basis, sometimes for 28 days or more in a row. That's pretty impressive discipline, and I've actually quite enjoyed in a bizarre way being part of that today, so thank you.
What a fantastic video. And we have Detective Inspector James Ansell giving us a talk a little bit later about that and other aspects of the related topic. But first we have a very distinguished representative of our armed forces, Rear Admiral Andrew Kite. He is Assistant Chief of Defence Staff and Chief Naval Logistics Officer. Rear Admiral Kite has responsibility for providing logistics advice to ministers and direction to the Ministry of Defence's operational planning. With over 30 years of logistic experience, he has served on operations in Northern Ireland, Afghanistan, and the Gulf, and most recently commanded the Standing Joint Force Logistic Headquarters in Oman and the Republic of Korea. He was appointed CB, so Companion to the Order of the Bath, in the 2020 New Year's Honours List for his contribution to Defence's response to the COVID pandemic. Rear Admiral Kite, it's a great honour for us to have you here, and I understand that you have a talk prepared about the key role of communities and the contribution of our armed forces. So please take it away.
Thank you very much, Dr. Umar. If I could have the first slide, please. So, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, and to you all, Ramadan Mubarak. It is a great honour and privilege to be invited to speak this evening at your Big Virtual Iftar. As has just been mentioned, I currently operate as the Assistant Chief of Defence Staff for Support Operations, and I'm based out of the Ministry of Defence in London. And throughout the COVID pandemic, so that's sort of coming up now for sort of 14, 15 months, I've been responsible for coordinating the logistic elements of Defence's response to the pandemic and providing support to other government departments. Could I have the next slide, please? So what I'm going to do in the next 10 minutes or so is really just talk to you about the military support that the armed forces can provide to the community, to give you some examples of some of the activities and operations we've done over the past few years, but then focusing in particular on the COVID support that we provided during 2020 and into 2021, and look really at some of the examples and how that impacted on our relationships with and our interaction with the local communities that we helped to serve. And I hope to be able to bring out of that some of the sort of facets of the way in which support to the local communities by defence can contribute to building relationships. Next slide, please. So this slide gives you an overview of the kind of military support that the military has a long tradition of providing. COVID response is not something new in the sense of the military standing in to support local communities and the local authorities. And over the last 10, 20 years or so, there's some examples there you can see on the slide, whether that was the foot and mouth pandemic back in 2001, ranging through to the London Olympics in 2012. Quite recently, the Novichok poisoning in Salisbury. And then you'll quite frequently see the military deployed onto the streets of this country in response to natural disasters and crises, in particular, just recently flooding, but also you'll see us on the streets to assist with snow and anything really that the local community needs support that is over and above what the emergency services can provide. Next slide, please. So what about the COVID support to the government? Well, I think it's fair to say that if you take the support that we've provided to the COVID pandemic over the last 12 to 14 months, it is without doubt Defence's largest ever peacetime resilience operation. At its peak, we had some 6,500 personnel committed on the streets in the different government departments. And that was in addition to the 1,600 or so medical staff that are embedded into the NHS on a day-to-day basis. Now that contribution is beginning to reduce, and we hope that as the pandemic is becoming under control, that we will reduce our footprint by the end of May to zero, and that will mark, I think, a really significant part in the overall operation. There are a couple of things just to pull out of this slide, which is the sort of contextual piece to it all. And the first is that the response from Defence was what we would call a whole force response. So it wasn't just soldiers, sailors and aviators contributing to the response, but it was also our civil servants, and it was also a large number of defence contractors. What was also, I think, interesting about it was that as we started our initial planning back in sort of February, March, early March, we expected this to be about mass. We expected it to be about putting lots and lots of our personnel into government, whether that would have been supporting the police or the ambulances or wherever. What it actually turned out to be amongst those 6,500 people that we used was it was all about niche skills. It was about our engineers. It was about our logisticians. It was about our medics for obvious reasons. It was about our environmental health experts. It was about our people that have commercial and procurement skills. And it became those technical specialists that were able to really make a difference, rather than just lots and lots of people, if that makes sense, which was not what we expected. Another couple of points on that slide as well. We also provided a great deal of support to our overseas territories. So we were supporting the populations of Gibraltar, the Falkland Islands, and a number of the Caribbean islands who were struck with COVID as well. So it was not just within the confines of the United Kingdom. And at the same time, of course, the world didn't stop. And so we were still maintaining our own operational outputs, whether that was maritime patrols in the Arabian Gulf, or whether that was forces in Northern Europe. That went on all at the same time. Next slide, please. So this slide just gives you a sense of the range of tasks that the military undertook. It's not exhaustive, but it gives, I think, split into the UK on the left and the overseas on the right, the range of activity that we undertook. I think what it does bring out for us and for everyone really is the range of skills our people hold. And I think it also brings out our utility in being able to provide support and underpinning the resilience of the country. And I think if you sort of look at those different ways in which we lent in to the crisis, you'll sort of, I think, get a sense of ways in which we were able to interface with local communities. And I think if I was to draw out three particular examples where that interface with communities was the greatest, I think it was undoubtedly where we were called upon to build Nightingale hospitals. It was where we were called upon to assist with ambulance driving. It was where we undertook mobile and community testing. And I think it was also where we were augmenting into the National Health Service. Could I have the next slide, please? And so when you look at the National Health Service support that we provided, and if you just take a moment, I think, to read the quotes on that slide, you'll get the sense, I hope, that the support we were able to provide to the National Health Service, and this is the front line, as we all know, of the pandemic, and we should all pay tribute to the dedication and sacrifice that our doctors and nurses and paramedics and ambulance drivers and everybody, and the ancillary staff and the cleaners and everybody involved in the NHS have provided. But that we were able to provide a really invaluable and appreciated injection of support. And I think both our clinical staff and the general duties personnel that we put into the hospitals provided a real injection of energy and resilience and discipline, just at the moment where the National Health Service was under probably its greatest pressure. And I think in that sense and in that role, the interaction that we had with our communities was immense. Next slide, please. It's also worth just pointing out very briefly that defence also played a really significant role, especially during the early parts of the pandemic, as the nation wrestled with chronic shortfalls in PPE. And we undertook a lot of work to assist with the procurement of PPE through our commercial bodies. We did a lot of work to help reset the whole supply chain for PPE, which had been historically based on a just-in-time, very fragmented, stovepiped approach, which was just not robust and resilient enough for the crisis that transpired. And of course, we spent a lot of time, as you can see there, of soldiers driving around the country, in all parts of the country, helping to deliver PPE at times when the NHS was down to sort of 12 or 24 hours worth of supply. And we were able to keep that blood supply of PPE, if you like, going throughout. Next slide, please. And I think one area which is just worth just spending a little time on is the community testing and the community and mobile testing that we undertook. This slide talks about community testing, but we were also heavily involved in mobile testing. In fact, the mobile testing prototype was developed by military engineers, and we operated them for some considerable time before passing them on to some contractors. But I think our interaction with local communities was at its most significant and most far-reaching throughout this community testing function. You can see on the slide there is the example of Liverpool, which was one of 5 locations where we took part. And what happened was that Defence was asked to pioneer and develop the establishment of a model for community testing that was able to target and help suppress COVID hotspots. And then we were then asked to help to train the incoming civilian and contractor force who were able to then set up the enduring solution. Overall, Defence in just Liverpool alone tested somewhere in the region of about 200 to 250,000 people over a period of time, which was an unprecedented opportunity for the military to engage with the local community. Next slide, please. So what conclusions can we draw from this? Well, I think the slide to some extent speaks for itself. Defence can provide some very niche skills, as the COVID crisis has demonstrated. We are able to deploy at pace and deliver rapid effect. We are self-sufficient, and we have these people, very high-skilled people, at that sort of short few hours notice to move. And we kind of know how to deal with uncertainty and chaos. All of us have dealt with it at some stage in our careers. It's our bread and butter. And so we are fairly good in a crisis, we'd like to think. We can bring reassurance, and we can bring skills to planning, but we're not a long-term solution. We are absolutely a sort of a short-term solution that paves the way for something more enduring. And I think whatever we do, we end up helping to build positive relationships with our communities. But I would stress that we're not a silver bullet or a panacea for every problem or every crisis. And I think that's important to take away. But I think my final thoughts would be that the relationships that we as the armed forces have with our local communities is absolutely critical. We are, at the end of the day, the nation's, your Navy, Army, and Air Force. And therefore, it is absolutely essential that we are able to develop our relationships with community groups from all faiths and all sectors. The Army, Air Force, and Navy can't hide behind its security fences and only come out for a crisis. Instead, we've got to find, I think, every opportunity to interact with those people that we serve and protect, so that we are seen as being approachable, accountable, and representative of the societies that we serve. That concludes my pitch, and I'll be delighted to take some questions later on. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Rear Admiral. That was very enlightening. I think it's a message which hopefully the whole nation at some point can hear and should hear, to really understand the important contributions that the military and the armed forces are providing, even in peacetime, even within our own country. I remember having a COVID test, I think about a year ago, from one of these sites, and was impressed by the efficiency and the effectiveness of the whole operation. So thank you very much for that. We're going to go to our poll, our next poll. This is poll number 2, and this is showing the question here is, who do you feel should play the biggest part in community cohesion? And again, if you go to slido.com #BVI, or you use the QR code by taking out your camera app and snapping that funny looking square there, it'll take you right to it. And if we can get you guys voting, really encourage everyone who is just thinking about, maybe I should vote, maybe I shouldn't, please do vote. Please do take part. And let us know what you think. So the question is, who do you feel should play the biggest part in community cohesion? Police, government, academic institutions, faith groups, and charities. It strikes me we have representatives of almost every one of these groups present. So hopefully all the biases cancel out. So let us know what you think. And let's have a quick discussion about these different options. Government, of course, has a key role in obviously setting policy, but also I think has a role in leading by example, and politicians, what they do and what they say can have a huge impact on the wider culture. So perhaps that's one way that they can influence community cohesion. Academic institutions, of course, can highlight certain areas, can provide in-depth research on ways, things about discrimination or things, other aspects of cohesiveness in society, be it economic, political, or cultural, etc. Faith groups, of course, as I hope you're seeing, for instance, our community plays a great role, or tries to really emphasize serving others in our community. And obviously this is something other religious communities do as well. The police, especially the British style of policing, is not just sort of a punitive style of policing, but very much involved in integrating the police and into the wider community and providing wider service. And of course, charities play a key role, you could say, by taking wealth from where it is not needed as much and providing it to those in need, and making sure that people aren't left out. And the scores are still up and down, but I think one key, very interesting one is really standing out, and that's obviously government with 54% at the moment, and faith groups around 30%. I think that shows actually the great responsibility on government, that despite all these other sectors in society, over 50% of our, the people that have voted are saying that government has the biggest part to play in community cohesion. So that shows the responsibility that they bear to ensure that they are leading by examples, that they're setting the right policies to promote that. And I think we will close that poll there. Thank you very much, everyone, for taking part in that. And we are going to move on to our next talk. And this is with Detective Inspector James Ansell. He has served with the Surrey Police for the last 14 years. He's currently working in the Surrey and Sussex Major Crime Team, and is soon to move on to the Safeguarding Investigation Unit to lead the team in Staines. James is a strong supporter of inclusion, diversity, and equity, and was delighted to participate in the Fasting Collective, an opportunity to authentically live the experience of his Muslim colleagues. And we saw a little bit about that earlier. But James, thank you very much for joining us. And please take it away with your talk.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum to all my Muslim friends and colleagues on the line this evening for this amazing virtual iftar, and Ramadan Kareem to you all. Good evening. I'm Detective Inspector James Ansell from Surrey Police, as you've just been told. Firstly, a huge thank you for having me here tonight. It's a real honour to actually represent Surrey Police and be here. So thank you. I'd also like to start by thanking Farhan Hayat. For those of you who don't know Farhan, he's a colleague of mine who works for Surrey Police, and he's our inclusion lead. He does an amazing job at Surrey Police promoting inclusion and creating this cohesive workforce that we strive to be. This is just one example, pulling together the Fasting Collective of what he does. So thank you for all you do for us. It's been an amazing event. This is just one thing that he does throughout the year. One of the other things that you need to be really proud of is the positive recruitment you do for our BAME officers, something that's just fantastic. As a police force, we want to represent the community we serve, be more inclusive. So thank you. You really do make Surrey Police a better place to work. So now I'll talk about what we're here for tonight, and that was the Fasting Collective, which I did on Wednesday. What an incredible experience it was. So as you've seen on the videos, it started at 4 a.m. With a virtual suhoor, led by the young Imam, Sama Ahmadi. And it was just incredible, such an inspirational, eye-opening conversation at that time in the morning. And it felt really special to be amongst all my colleagues and people on the line to take part in that suhoor at 4 a.m. So it started there, off to a good start. There was in the region of sort of 60 plus Surrey police officers, which I think is a fantastic turnout to show our support and solidarity to our Muslim colleagues and get a better understanding about what happens. Started then, I thought, oh, it's going okay. Couple of hours in, a little bit thirsty, not too bad. Got to probably 10, 11 o'clock, and that's when it really started to hit. But I just count myself really lucky. It gave me a lot of time to reflect on, one, how lucky I am, how there aren't other people aren't so lucky around the world, in our country and other places, that you can't just go to the fridge or go to the tap to grab a drink. So I really took some time to reflect, and then in between calls and work stuff, I actually did some reading around Ramadan to improve my understanding. And yeah, it just made me feel very lucky, but grateful for the real small things in life. And I think I probably went to a bit of a spiritual zone, or somewhere in my own mind, one, to take my mind off the hunger and the thirst, but also just to open my mind to how lucky I am and different ways of living and thinking. And when it got to the afternoon, work was very busy, so I think that kept my mind off things, but it was extremely difficult. But I only did it for one day. For those who do it for a month or more, I mean, kudos to you. Incredible, absolutely incredible. Because 24 hours, well, the one day was hard enough. It came on to then 6 p.m. So I went up to headquarters with other colleagues to pick up our food parcels prepared by the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. So that's at 6 p.m. They were a bit late. I don't think I got back to about 7:30. And then we logged back online for 8 o'clock to have our virtual iftar, again, led by the young Imam. And that was really special to be around all the people I'd seen in the morning, colleagues I caught up with HQ to share our experiences, to then log back on to see how everyone was doing and share our stories. I think people have been on all different journeys, which is quite interesting, as expected. And then it started off breaking the fast, opening the fast by having a bottle of water and a date. And I can't tell you, that's the best sip of water and the best date I've ever eaten. And it felt, again, really special. And I almost didn't want to drink or eat more, and I wanted to live in that moment. After that, I then, in the oven was the food parcel, it's prepared cooking. And that food, Ahmadiyya Muslim community, UK Muslim youth, huge shout out to you. The food was excellent. Those samosas were probably some of the best samosas I've ever tasted. Didn't eat all of it. I was really full, and then just felt totally satisfied. And I had a really early night, and actually going to sleep that night, I reflected on the past, when I woke up at 4 a.m. Felt really proud to be part of it, really part of a community, and really good to understand what the Muslim community go to, friends, colleagues, and people at work. So that was a personal experience. I'd recommend it to anyone. Those of you that are doing it tonight and you haven't got long, have you, till you can't eat and drink, well done to you all. And for those of you in the community, I say that do it for 30 days or more, then total and utter respect to you. So that's a personal journey. I'd recommend it to anyone. Massive eye opener. And actually the last couple of days, I've not eaten or drunk as much as I normally would. But on a professional note, I'd really like to talk around what I learned, and I think that's what's really important, actually understanding as a manager and as a leader at Surrey Police that I want to support my colleagues as best I can. So it's really given me an insight and an understanding of what our Muslim colleagues go through, what fasting's about, and the simple things, coming to work after being up at 4 a.m. to do a full day's work, to go to meetings feeling hungry, feeling tired, to still stay reflective, do some reading, go to prayer. All of those things, I think we need to educate people more to get this understanding. I feel like I can be a better manager and a better leader to understand and really appreciate what our colleagues are doing and what they're going through. I say really proud to be part of this. Moving forward, Surrey Police, we are all about an inclusive workforce. Do not tolerate any type of hate crime. Our priorities around protecting the vulnerable, pursuing our offenders and keeping our community safe. So I think events like this are so key. We need to do more of it and educate ourselves. The guest speakers online tonight have been incredible, and I feel lucky to be here, really lucky to listen to it. So I want to share this with my colleagues and do more work like this so we can be a better, more inclusive workforce. Being frank, we don't see the right picture in the media, do we, about our Muslim community or Islamic faith? So I think it's really important we do all we can to actually promote and educate understanding of it. I can't thank you enough to all the people I've mentioned: Ahmadiyya Muslim community, UK Muslim youth, the young Imam, great guy. Your social media platform I think is incredible. I think it's really inclusive, really eye-opening, and will capture anyone's interest to involve them. And for Farhan Hayat, colleague, hats off to you for all you do for Surrey Police. On behalf of the whole of Surrey Police, our Chief Constable and Chief Officers, who I know are really proud of you, thanks for setting up this event, and thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you, Detective Inspector James. That was a very touching talk about, you know, this very clear display of solidarity that you've taken part in the National Fasting Challenge. Because it's one thing to kind of talk if you will, but you've kind of walked the walk and really shown that solidarity and shown your willingness to understand what it's like to go through Ramadan and you know, really take part in it. So thank you to you and to your force, and obviously I think the armed forces, members of the armed forces also have taken part, so perhaps that can be discussed in the Q&A coming up a little bit later. But for now we have our third poll, so if we can show that. And this is a direct question to you all. Muslims develop their spirituality through prayers and sincere worship of God. What helps you develop your spirituality? Prayers, meditation, yoga, or spending time in nature? Now, obviously, it may be more than one of these, but I think our question here is, you know, what is the chief among them? Which is the main one that helps you to develop your spirituality? So go to slido.com #BVI, or take that QR code and put it in your camera app, and it'll take you straight there. And again, I would say if you're not really sure about doing it, please do it. We'd love to, you know, hear your voice and see what you think. And at the moment, prayers is leading it, but we also have spending time in nature. And let's just pause for a moment and think about some of these options. Spending time in nature, you could say it kind of connects you with the wider world. It takes you out of yourself. We can spend a lot of our time in life very much focused on, you know, developing my career or relationships or this or that. It's very much me. When you spend time in nature, you get a sense of the wider context of the world. You realize you're not kind of the only living being in the world, and there is a whole ecosystem around you filled with so many other living beings. And I think it actually inclines one to being reflective of our wider purpose and, you know, the reason why we're here, because the grandiosity of nature itself is something that takes your mind to those places. It makes you realize actually maybe it isn't all just about my career and my money or my relationships. Maybe there is something bigger at work here. And I think actually meditation and yoga, one could say do similar things, especially meditation. It's again about calming down those constant thoughts that come up And yoga, while I'm not a practitioner myself, perhaps has a similar calming effect, as well as its physical effects. But prayer is in the lead with 72% at the moment. And this is certainly the most direct way that I would say one can connect with the higher power, with God, whom obviously Muslims believe in, because it is essentially direct communication. It's not a question of reflection. It's not a question of thinking and pondering over the wider world. It's about actually directly communicating with God and saying, well, if God did indeed create us, then actually surely he is all hearing and he can hear our prayers. And if all these prophets that have come before in all these different religious cultures around the world are true, then they have been, spoken to by God, and they have shown you how to develop a relationship with God. And the chief method, which all of them have actually given, is prayer. So it's very interesting. Therefore, prayer is the top of our list here, with 77%, but the others do see some representation as well. So thank you very much for joining us in that poll. I think we'll wrap that one up there. And I'm going to hand you over to Imam Mansour Clark, who is going to be hosting our question answer session. So Imam Clark, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Dr. Umar. Good evening. Thank you very much for everyone joining in. Of course, I think if there's any other situation, I'd be called that I am looking after the graveyard shift, as I'm waiting for several hundred people to open up their fast on the call. I think it's an interesting time for us to kind of really focus in on why we are here right now, to speak to some of our guests, to kind of understand what's on their mind as well. Of course, we've had the absolute pleasure of hearing from Rear Admiral Andy Kite and Detective Inspector James Ansell, as well as the wonderful Dr. Anas Rana, a brilliant, great friend of ours as well. I want to kind of ask a couple of questions to kind of get more under the skin of the issue, as it were. Coming to you first, Andy, what kind of and how much of an impact do you think that faith and faith groups can have with regards to societal and communal peace? What kind of a role do you think they can play?
Thanks, Mansour. It's a very good question. I think actually at the end of the day, all faith groups, all community groups have to come together if we are going to achieve a multicultural, an integrated, a harmonious, a peaceful society. And therefore, the role that faith groups can play is essential in being that face, that vocal line into societies, because there is nothing worse, I think, than operating in stovepipes or in isolated groups.
Absolutely.
You've got to bring everybody together. There has to be communication and there has to be understanding. And I think James's pitch about his fast and the Surrey Police collective fasting, I think is just a fabulous way of doing that. I did it for one day, and I echo everything that James said. It was physically enormously challenging, but it does bring to you that spiritual, that deep moving sense of what people do for their faith. And I understand it much more than I did the previous day. And so I think that these type of events that you're doing are absolutely priceless. But we've got to do it right across community groups in order to get after that harmonious sense and state that we all would aspire to.
Absolutely. I think it's a very key point to make, because of course this is a Muslim event, but of course these events should be carried out across all faiths to create that harmony in society and that communal cohesion. A very good point there. James, I mean, I'll be honest, I was moved by your, I can't call it a speech, more like that talk, which was about your experience and your journey through this one fast. It felt like you went through so many different stages within that day. How much of your experience of the Big Virtual Iftar and of fasting do you think it can be taken away into the life of a non-Muslim? And would you recommend the experience to others?
Yeah, 100% I'd recommend it, and so much can be taken away from it. I think myself, I was quite naive, and when I saw it online at work, I thought, this seems really great, a great thing for us to do and experience, but I didn't really quite appreciate what was going to go into it. I didn't think about the 4 a.m. alarm, well, 3:30 alarm clock, then get up for the virtual suhoor.
Yeah.
I didn't think about any of that. And I thought about probably not eating, but I didn't think about not having any water. I just didn't open my mind, and quite embarrassingly, was probably quite naive. And I know that's only one part of it. And for me, I actually really enjoyed learning about what people in the Muslim community might do during Ramadan, reading of the Quran. But for me, I liked the whole thing around not getting involved in any confrontation, getting that peace of mind, having that time to reflect. And that's what I personally really enjoyed. And I found it really interesting. Every colleague I spoke to that day on a Zoom call or Teams meeting or any briefing I attended, they were all extremely interested. So for me, just having that conversation with one colleague, I know they're going to go on to 2, 3, 4, 5 others.
Yeah.
And as I say, I think there was in the region about 60 police officers in the force that did it, police officers and police staff. I think that's incredible. It's really sent really positive waves, I think, through the force. Again, it's that understanding of really understand what your colleagues are going through, because I've been crewed with a colleague in uniform before on a night shift years ago, and he was fasting, and I thought, oh, he's fasting, didn't think much of it. But now, on reflection, I thought, wow, we're on a night shift in uniform, responding to emergencies. He's there probably tired, thirsty, got what's going on in his own life and with his own faith, but still doing such a good job. So for me, that's what counts. And as a manager and leader in Surrey Police, I want to promote more of this. And as Mr. Kite said, I think there's so much more that can be done. I think the community itself absolutely keep pushing this, be proactive, because people need to hear and see it. Sadly, we only hear about the bad stuff, don't we, or something that's actually not about the Islamic faith or the Muslim community. It's just really quite ridiculous. So we need to push it. It needs to be more positive. But yeah, do Surrey Police, go national, all police forces. It can be done in schools, armed forces, public sector, health services. I think the world's your oyster with it. I think you could really go huge and make it such a good educating people.
Oh, I think, do you know what I mean? Let me just, again, I mean, I'm sure you've heard it from dozens of people already, but I mean, like, full kudos and respect to you. And I think it's very, very admirable for you to have taken on the challenge yourself and actually have gone through that experience yourself. And I think something that was already said already by Andy about learning more every day. I think that's something that every single Muslim goes through as well, where every fast that we do, we learn a little bit more about ourselves, our own kind of human fragility. So it's a very much a learning experience for us all.
Absolutely.
Anas, coming to yourself, I mean, personally speaking, we've heard so much about fasting, and we hear so much about the religious background and the theological background. But as a person, why is fasting so important to you? What makes it so integral to who you are as a Muslim?
Jazakallah for the question. Thanks. That's a really interesting question. I think I'll start with a simple aspect. My nephew said this once to me, not about fasting, but about prayer. Young nephew. And he said that when you go to prayer, it just quietens everything down and you can focus on thinking and praying. And I think this in a similar sort of way applies to fasting, because you are cutting out a really important aspect, of what you do day to day. You're not going, 3-4 times during a work day to the coffee machine to grab a coffee. You're not drinking the whole time. You're not eating. So that frees up so much of your time to think about and reflect on life, on worship. There's so many aspects to it that really open up to you. The spiritual aspect, the remembrance of, a lot of people go through this day to day in their life where they don't have food, etc. So there's so many aspects of it. It's difficult to put it in but as a general overview, I would say that this is generally speaking why it's so important for me personally.
And just staying with you for a moment, I mean, there's lots of different reasons that people have talked about as to how there's been a benefit to fasting. But of course, one big element which would be remiss of us not to talk about is that spiritual development, that spiritual advancement. How do you personally feel that fasting helps with that spiritual development? I mean, how does it make you spiritually, but also morally? How does it affect you?
I think fasting. There's only one aspect of fasting that we've spoken about, the aspect about not eating. But fasting is a lot more than that. It is actually about, reducing some of the clutter that you have in your day to day, and using that time and spending it on worship. And that's how you spiritually grow. Reading the Holy Quran, doing more prayers, praying for others. That's how you grow as a human being spiritually, I think.
Great. I mean, Andy, we talked about a lot of different things, and I mean, it would again, I won't miss the opportunity to ask you a little bit about your phenomenal experiences. I mean, we heard the introduction. I think that's got a lot of us on the back foot already in terms of everything that you've managed to accomplish. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about some of the memorable experiences that you've personally had? Sui's trying to get involved in the conversation. Not right now. But some of the experiences that you've personally had while serving as Rear Admiral that perhaps some of us can take lessons from during this month of reflection.
Yes, thank you. So I mean, I think if I sort of just view my career over 30 odd years of serving in the Navy all over the world on various sort of operations and so on and so forth, I suppose there are a number of different highlights. Serving in Afghanistan in 2009 was one particular highlight. We were doing a lot of reconstruction work. We were doing a lot of security work as we sought to try and bring peace and stability to Helmand. And we were building roads, and we were building schools, and we were building hospitals. So that connected us with a community in a different way. But that was a very, I think, powerful and very rewarding and very challenging for obvious reasons. It was tough, but you got a sense of you were trying to achieve something. And let's hope that over the next few months, as Afghanistan goes through its next phase, that all that sacrifice and all that effort that people made over the last 10, 15 years was worth it. It's fingers crossed that will be the case. But I think, if you ask me what was the most demanding thing I've ever done, it's the last 12 months. I don't think I think it's fair to say that I would see the leadership challenges of the last 12 months during the COVID crisis were without doubt the biggest and hardest thing I've ever done. And I think that was for a number of different reasons. I think it was practically and professionally very difficult and challenging because there was no baseline to compare it against. We weren't really prepared for a pandemic. We'd never modeled it. We'd never exercised it. And so when we were all stood up to do this operation, we all sort of looked at each other and said, well, where do we start? And you can normally, in an operation or an exercise or something, there will be somebody that will say, well, I did this similar thing a few years ago. Yeah. You pull the books off the shelf and the policy and the ways of doing business. This was totally unique. And I think the other aspect to it, which brings it, I think, really home to us as human beings, as fathers, husbands, brothers, and so on and so forth, is how profound it was. So normally for us, we deploy and we go away, and our families are left at home, and they, are normally safe and sound. But of course, not only were we worrying about how we did the job and how we would provide the support that we're being asked to do, but we also had at the same time concerns about our families. And so there was no home and away. Everything was all together. And I think as a result, trying to lead a team through that, when you knew that the people that you were asking to put in 14, 16-hour days had at the back of their minds, how's my family, and they were having to travel into London every day when the rest of the population was all staying at home. So it was quite a unique sort of phase. So yeah, without doubt, the last 12 months has been the most demanding.
That's very interesting. And I guess it's that same spirit of sacrifice which kind of ties into what many Muslims around the world are engaged in the month of Ramadan as well. That ability to do something, but then singling yourself out and making that sacrifice for a bigger cause and for something bigger and better. I think that's a very, very powerful point to take. James, coming to you, of course, I mean, you've had experience in the line of duty? I mean, what has your time in the line of duty taught you about community cohesion? What can we learn from your waves of experience?
It's all about our community, I'd say. I was lucky enough. I've been with Surrey Police for 14 years now. But in my first couple of years, I was a neighbourhood support officer. So you are a neighbourhood officer in that community. And that taught me we're nothing without our community. We police by consent most of the time. And you have to engage with your community. You have to work with them to be able to understand what their problems are, what their needs are, and how you can help them. Without community, it cannot be done. So it's huge, and that's what our priority's got to be. I think policing has taught me, I don't know where to start, so many things, but actually it comes down to people. Any community you're talking about, race, religion, wherever you want to go, it's just about knowing your audience and taking the time to understand that community. But I think, as Mr. Kite said, this pandemic, I was really proud to be a police officer and a detective through it. It was very challenging, but it made me proud to be a police officer. Also proud of my team, and just made me realise what people are capable of at work. People have their own stresses, own anxieties, going against government guidelines, obviously doing their job, whilst other people are told to stay at home. And it just showed me we're actually capable of anything. I think if we put our mind to it, if we support ourselves, support our colleagues, support the wider communities, we can achieve anything. And it makes you realise we're all the same. We're all here together, and we need to help and support each other. And I think the pandemic's really showed that, how we can pull through and all get on and achieve amazing things.
What an amazing point to end on. Rear Admiral Andy Kite, Detective Inspector James Ansel, and Dr. Anas Rana. What a fantastic conversation about some very key issues there. Of course, we are, as everyone knows, we're moving towards the end of today's fast. Hopefully, we'll be hearing the call to prayer at 24 minutes past 8 in a couple of minutes. And before then, we'll be also reciting a small prayer. It's a very short prayer, which Muslims traditionally recite at the end of the fast to mark the ending of the fast before we hear the call to prayer. And I guess what we have experienced over today, and what people have experienced over many months and many years of fasting, very much encapsulates the purpose of Ramadan. The fact that we focus in upon empathy, realizing that other people may not have the same luxuries that we have. When we have certain problems and afflictions in our life, often we believe that it's the be-all and end-all of everything. And yet when we look at our so-called sacrifices, we realize that people around the world would see those same quote-unquote sufferings as absolute luxuries. And I think it's a very, very important point for us to remember, to count our blessings and not our problems. So indeed, a fantastic conversation. Thank you to everyone who took part. Just moving towards the end, we have about half a minute left before the fast. The prayer goes as follows. Allahumma inni laka sumtu wa bika amantu wa alayka tawakkaltu wa ala rizqika aftartu. And the English translation of that is, O Allah, I observe the fast for your sake. I believe in you and I put my trust in you. And I end the fast with what you have provided me. Ameen. Again, a very poignant prayer there, emphasizing on the fact that we fast, Muslims fast for the sake of God, to bring about that realization of God, and to bring about the understanding that we are a culmination of the blessings that we are given in every day, and to really look at the things that are around us and to praise God for them. And with that, I believe we are now moving to the call to prayer.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
Thank you very much for staying with us. What we're going to be doing now is we're going to be breaking our fast, and we're going to be having a little bit of a chat for the next few minutes before we close and do a silent prayer. I think the three of us may be breaking fast at slightly different times because we may be in slightly different parts of England. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. Rear Admiral, can I ask? I think you said you did a fast one day. What would you say is the best part of it, and also maybe the most difficult part of it?
Gosh, so I think really just echoing what James said. I think the physical side of it was difficult. My blood sugar levels by about 3 o'clock went through the floor, and I could barely keep my eyes open. I mean, I was absolutely wrecked. But I think what was great for me was just the having never done it before, and you hear people talk about it in a very sort of, I think, quite a glib way. People just sort of go, "Oh, fasting," and actually, what it was good for me was it made me realise what it actually entails physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And I learned a huge amount just in that sort of small window. I did it a few weeks ago, so I didn't quite have as long a day as James did, and I went as far east as I could. I've been doing it the West Country, like today would have been a really long day. James picked the wrong week.
Yeah, I did.
That's great.
I mean, Omar, we've heard a lot from other people. How's your fasting been?
It's been a bit tougher this year, I think, than some previous years, because my job's an award. It's a bit more intense than some of my previous jobs. Still very doable, but it is quite draining. I think one thing which maybe you guys can relate to is when you're not eating, you don't automatically take lunch breaks, so you don't have that cue to go and have food. So it's very easy just to skip it and think, I'll just power through and get my work done. But that just makes everything much more draining. So today I made sure to just leave my ward and just go somewhere else and sit somewhere else for a little while. But I think it's hardest, especially for the surgeons who are in theatre all day, from the medical profession, I mean, because that's extremely difficult. But people do it. I mean, it's what I find amazing about fasting, and when I try and tell friends about it, is that it's actually doable. It seems so impossible when you hear about it, but it's actually doable. And then when you add in the spiritual rewards of this month, it's all very rewarding. You know, the idea being to reduce your physical intakes but increase your spiritual intake. As Dr. Anas said, it kind of frees up that time and that mind space for those purposes.
I'm also mindful of the fact that, I mean, three of us are fronting very significant headgear. And I mean, it's probably the only situation in which Andy and James wouldn't be having their headgear on, and it's the other people that don't have their headgear on. So I'm enjoying the irony here. I think it's interesting because during Ramadan, I guess we again have an opportunity to really reflect on the things that matter most. That usually we're thinking about, oh, what's for dinner, what's for lunch, what's for this, what's for that. And actually you start to realize that simple things like, as you said, water from the tap or food from the fridge, or sitting down, having family time, especially during COVID-19 and the lockdown that we've all had, it's been a massive experience for us to really realize the blessings that we have. And for Muslims in Ramadan, and indeed non-Muslims in Ramadan who have participated in the fast, I think it really encapsulates that experience. So I think personally, I mean, I'm over the moon that I'm meeting people that have experienced it with me. And it feels that we've made a community with people that we otherwise wouldn't have had the fast with. So again, a massive respect to both of you for participating, and also to all of the forces and all the other people out there that have been experiencing this journey with us as well. So, I mean, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you everyone for joining us in this event. We have another big virtual iftar on the 8th, next week on the 8th. And let me just get up exactly when that will be. That is at 7:30 p.m. And if you go to bigvirtualiftar.co.uk, you'll be able to find the details for that. The format will be similar, but obviously the theme will be different. We'll have another fantastic lineup of guests. So please do join us next week on the 8th of May. We're going to finish with silent prayer. Again, this is a traditional way that we finish our prayer. And Dr. Imam Mansour.
I can be a doctor if you want me to be.
Doctor of Religion, Imam Mansour, please take us away from that, please.
Please feel free to join me however you see fit or however you wish to. Please join me in silent prayer. Ameen.
Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next week on the 8th of May at 7:30 p.m. Until then, Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you.